I guess. 20,000 Leagues. Whoa, if I can get it to go the right way. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. Published in serial form from like 1869 to 1870. Published in its full version in 1871. I listened to Frederick Davidson read a version, which I shamefully do not know who the translator is on that. I believe it was a 2008, 2002 kind of performance of the book, so it probably wasn't the most recent, pristine version, but indeed it is what I listened to, and I would highly recommend, indeed, listening to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, narrated by Frederick Davidson. I've listened to him before do some very nautical books, the Northern Voyages, Southern Voyages, by an author whose name completely escapes me, but I'll put in the thing down below. He is really a great fellow for terms, for like Latin, like a lot of Latin stuff, a lot of biological, nautical, that terminology, stuff that I would totally bog me down if I was having to read this. He says it beautifully, he says it flowingly, and you can just sort of let it wash over you, because indeed this is a book that has a lot in it to wash over you. For all it being a exciting adventure, one of the exciting adventures of the 19th century of Professor Arnox getting all this news about some kind of strange beast, narwhal-like beast, roaming the seas and terrorizing the oceans and punching holes in ships and stuff like that, and going aboard the Abraham Lincoln, an American ship, to investigate this, where he meets Ned Landers. And Professor Arnox is accompanied by his faithful servant, because you have to have a faithful servant in these books. Comment Saul. I will say it proudly, and I will say it confidently, like I can actually say it. I vaguely can remember how Frederick Davidson said it, and I'll say Consol, and so they get on board. They of course get knocked off, and they end up in the ocean, where they're fished out by Captain Nemo of the Nautilus. Indeed, it is not a beast; it is a submarine, very earliest of submarines, where apparently Jules Verne saw some of the very kind of earliest submarines and drew inspiration for that. And indeed, the name Nautilus apparently comes from one of them. And they go on this adventure, which is, I think, people looking for action adventure. This is more like a sea voyage, where one damn thing happens after another, but there are plenty of scenes of like sort of like awe and wonder of you going through like this underwater forest, and you're seeing like, wow, this is the undiscovered country. This is this vast part of the earth that is completely hidden from us, and this is the first chance to imagine what it would be like. This is truly, I think people who write the awe and wonder of space travel and going to far alien planets and stuff like that, well, go underneath the waves, and indeed here is all these wonders. Now the problem with Verne is Verne and his character, a professor, are really obsessed with all the little details, and like nothing better than to explain everything to you, which is where having this on audiobook is a really good idea, because then Frederick Davidson reads it and it just sort of washes past you, and you do not have to concern yourself with it. Or at least I did not have to concern myself with it. Maybe someone who's interested in the wonders of electricity, because indeed, hilariously, like science fiction authors everywhere, they're fascinated by the new technology of the time and how this will change everything, and it's amazing. And you're saying, like, you're talking about electricity, dude. And yeah, I mean, yeah, it is one of the wonders of the world, one of the wonders of the 19th century, but still, it's like cyberpunk guys going on about the computer, and oh my goodness, this is how you boot up the computer, and isn't this amazing? And then you're someone who's reading this now going, yeah, dude, you're booting up a computer. You just click the back and you go on. You don't describe everything, which is what Verne can be completely guilty of in some passages. There is also the thing of, you can see that Verne's fascination for a lot of this stuff is the wonders, the natural wonders, I'm gonna like, and stuff like that. And so there's a couple of climactic points. There's a hilarious climactic point at the very end, which recalls to me The Hobbit, where at the end of The Hobbit, there's this dramatic clash of the armies, and in the book, it's Bilbo gets knocked on the head and is unconscious for everything, and somebody kind of just gives him a little summary at the end. And literally the same thing happens here. I don't know what it is about older authors, but well, actually, you know what it is about older authors? They go, I'm writing a book, I'm not doing a movie, which, by Verne's point, there probably were just the stirrings of movies, but their concerns are a lot different. I can see in a dramatization of this with James Wood as Nemo and Kirk Douglas as Ned Flanders, the Canadien, the French Canadian, that this would be dramatized and would take up the last quarter of the movie, something like that. But yes, in the book, he gets knocked unconscious, and he wakes up at the end, and someone tells me, it was all fine, whatever. Or does he wake up? Oh, mystery. I better not get into too many spoilers with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Am I been saying 2,000? Hopefully not. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which is, of course, it's 20,000 leagues under seas is the actual French, which is because nobody goes down 20,000 leagues. That would, I think, put you out the other side, which, of course, in my ignorance of what a league was, I thought, hey, why aren't we going deep in this book? When do we go 20,000 leagues under the sea? It's like, no, that doesn't happen here. We go 20,000 leagues all over the place, and there are many voyages which go to, actual places, but you also do stuff like you get to visit the lost city of Atlantis and stuff like that. So there's a lot of fun stuff in here. There's a lot of fascinating stuff. There's a lot of beautiful language actually in here. Even in whatever the translation I read, maybe it was Frederick Davidson and his beautiful reading of it, which Verne really gets into. I can see him being a naturalist, a writer about nature, and wrapping this up in the story of. I get to it finally. The Mysterious Nemo, which is in some ways it's a bookend thing. Nemo, which I guess is just the Latin of no man. He's someone who's renounced all civilization, and so maybe that's why he has no man. He has no name anymore. And you learn by the very end of the book what's the cause of this. But there's very much kind of a thing. However, accidentally, there seems to have been some switching of exactly who the villains were by the publisher, hilariously, of switching allegiances. It was supposed to be the evil Russians, but then the Russians were France's friends, so the publisher got him to change it to the evil British, which, British, they're always evil, so that was a good switch. But there's this whole thing of, him being a part of the oppressed of the nations, and there's very much, you can get the kind of political themes of industrialism, which is interesting in a book which is very much about sort of the consumption of the natural world. Professor Onox is often saying, about this fish or that. It's like, makes good eating. In which case you're thinking, yes, we're going to set up a massive fishery, decimate the population, rip out everything, and process it to feed the machine that is the Industrial Revolution. So it's an interesting book that way. It's interesting to look at this in comparison to someone like H.G. Wells, who was a science fictioner at the same time. They apparently had fights because Verne wanted everything explained painfully, every single little detail, where Wells was very much more, no, we just I kind of run over that stuff. This is me doing social commentary, and you can see in that case why someone like H.G. Wells is probably, at least the English version of H.G. Wells, seems to be a much more read and maybe a little less having to skim through his books because he doesn't insist on stopping on all this technology, which, give Verne a break. He was writing cutting technology at his time, but now that we're over 100 years later, that it's well over 100 years later, it's dated. I'm making fun of him for going on about the wonders of electricity. H.G. Wells avoided that. That said, there are plenty of pleasures to had in Jules Verne. I would recommend, at least for this one, definitely listen to it on audiobook. Listen to Frederick Davidson. I think it's Blackstone Audio. I got it out from Hoopla through my library, and just had a good time listening to it as I was biking along. So, it's not the greatest literature, but I can see this being kind of like, wow, this is early science fiction at its hard science fiction, which can be, hard science fiction, which can be sometimes can be kind of tedious, but also can have these things of wonder, especially I think when it gets into nature. I think nature writing is something that is interestingly, that's probably the part of it that really that I think it captures it. And I can almost believe that Verne was down there underwater, such is his craft. I mean, I also don't have a great amount of marine biology background, so I'm sure a marine biologist might be hooting and hawing through all of this. It's also just wonderful, all the different language and all the different names for stuff in the book. Just that languagey kind of that feel of it. I quite enjoy it just on that level. Of some of the best people who I've read who've done kind of pastiches of this really get into the language, really get into the odd, gnarly words that a Victorian would use. And even though this is like a translation, so it's not even a contemporary translation, it still captures that for me, while still making it quite readable, quite listenable. So yes, that's my review of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Sea. And yeah, maybe I'll. I don't know. Should I go back? Should I go back and see? Should I go and see Kirk Douglas as Ned Land, who probably has a much bigger part in the movie since he's Kirk Douglas, and Captain Nemo, who is a Mason. Now I've got his name is completely blanked out of my thing. James Mason, yes, as Captain Nemo. Probably, considering what the book was supposed to be, was probably supposed to be someone of Indian or Sikh descent, played by white English guy in a Disney movie, which is probably par for the course for then. But it might be kind of funny to look that up and see what they made of it. I'm sure they cut out all the boring parts. So yes, more videos later.